information about which one will actually do what we want them to do if they beat Barbara Boxer, especially given that all three are within the margin of error of Barbara Boxer. So we have Tom Campbell running. He has a distinguished public service record from just south of here. He was known as a frugal member of Congress, but in recent times he backed, last year for example, Proposition 1A, which was the largest tax increase in U.S. history at the state level. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with Prop 1A, I was one of 3 Republicans who actually voted against it on the floor of the Assembly. I was the only one that spoke against it. And I was so angry with the inside deal that was consummated between the Republican leadership, the Democrats, and the governor, that I resigned as chief Republican whip rather than be charged with trying to pass it. Then, on a speaking tour all across the state of California, using talk radio as a bully pulpit to try to educate people as to exactly what this was. And it ended up getting defeated by almost 2-1. And I understand that your Central Committee even took a stand on Prop 1A, was one of the couple of Central Committees that kind of rabble-roused for a bit and ended up getting some heat brought down on you by the establishment. But you know, at least you were out there kind of leading the charge against it. And so there's a distinction between myself and Mr. Campbell on that issue. He also backed a 32-cent a gallon gas tax increase in a state that already has the highest gas tax in the country. So we have some differences. Now, Barbara Boxer, Carly Fiorina, and Tom Campbell all supported the bailout of Wall Street as well. I was opposed to that from the beginning, and I wrote about it before it happened, and I explained why the bailout wouldn't work, and I explained why it would increase what's known as moral hazard. What is moral hazard? Well, at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you have 2 government-sponsored enterprises where the executives at said government-sponsored enterprises and the executives of the firms that invest in those securities have the opportunity to make money and fees and then transfer the risk to other people. Look to the left and right. You are the other people. That's called moral hazard. Moral hazard is when I get to make money and you get to take the risk of my making money. And the problem when you do that is that people will act on moral hazard. People take incentives, they just do it. Now, we did not solve the fundamental problems with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac with that bailout, and I wrote before the vote that that's not what we were solving. It wouldn't fix the problem. Now, the congressional ombudsman that was appointed to look into this reported to Congress about 4 weeks ago about this, and what he told Congress was that the bailout increased risk to the American financial system. That things are actually riskier today than they were before the bailout because of the bailout, which is what I wrote. I said that that would happen. On Christmas Eve last year, what happened with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Your president moved $400 billion of additional taxpayer money into those institutions to keep them solvent. Did it on Christmas Eve so you wouldn't notice. All right? So that's what's going on with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And there is a huge distinction between myself, Boxer, Fiorina, and Campbell. Let me give you another issue. Cap-and-trade energy tax, or AB 32. California's version of it. Boxer, Campbell, and Fiorina have all supported in the past one version or another of those schemes. Now, Fiorina is undergoing a battlefield conversion. That's great. As a lieutenant colonel, I'm all for battlefield conversions. But where was she when we needed her? Well, she was backing John McCain's cap-and-trade energy tax because it was thought at the time that we have to have our own Republican light version of the Democrat scheme so that we could, show that we were just as reasonable as the Democrats. Well, I don't believe that those schemes are appropriate for the American economy. I don't even think they're going to work. Which is one of the reasons why I've written 5 bills in the last 4 years to lift California's 32-year ban on the construction of modern nuclear power plants. Because that's one way. Yeah. That's one way you can get power. give you another example. Sonia Sotomayor, U.S. Supreme Court nominee. Barbara Boxer, Carly Fiorina, and Tom Campbell all supported her. I opposed. Now, here was the clincher for me with Sonia Sotomayor. You know what she said her big, important issue was for her as being a Supreme Court justice? Empathy. Empathy is a wonderful human trait, by the way. But if I'm looking to a Supreme Court nominee, I want them to rule on the law and the Constitution. I don't want them to be swayed by, oh, this poor person was so abused by this billion-dollar company. Can't they just spare a few $1 million to help her out? Well, what's the law say? You know, I mean, yeah, there may be a tough story there, okay? And you can feel for that person. But there's an old saying about the law. Lawyers will, of course, know it. It's the law is an ass. Okay? Meaning that you follow the rules. We have a tradition that we have in America where we've taken our following of laws from the Greco-Roman tradition, meaning that the laws are to be applied equally to everybody, not from the Eastern tradition of Confucianism that looks at the circumstances of the person and looks at human relations. That always leads to corruption, by the way, because if you don't have fixed rules, then you're always worried about who's friends of whom and who is going to be more impacted than someone else, which is why Sonia Sotomayor made that terrible ruling that was overturned regarding the firefighters who were denied promotions because less qualified applicants were promoted in front of them to meet quotas. And she ruled for the people who were less qualified. And, you know, I personally experienced some of that during the Clinton administration when my promotion to major was held up for a year because in my promotion group there were people who were less qualified that were promoted along with me, and other people who weren't qualified, who were dropped off of that promotion list, found out about it and sued and delayed my promotion to major by a year because they were more qualified than the people that the Clinton administration was trying to get promoted to major. And what they did in the end was just promote everyone, which is really great when you think about national security. We just promoted a few people who weren't as qualified. That really makes sense. So that's why I oppose Sonia Sotomayor. But Tom Campbell, Carly Fiorina, and Barbara Boxer, all the same on that issue. And so we're running a tough campaign, and I believe we're going to do well. Here's why. Look at those polls. Those same polls show that I'm in high single digits. Well, that's not so good, is it? 8 or 9%. But I know something that you all don't know about those polls. You see, in California, we have something called a ballot title. Ballot titles are very important in the way people perceive candidates. And my ballot title might as well say the following: Chuck Devore, son of a bitch. Because what they used when they polled for me was Chuck Devore, state assemblyman. State assemblyman. We got a 9% approval rating. I didn't know that there was that many legislative staffers and family in the state of California. 9%. That's obviously who approves of us, legislative staff and salary, or in family, right? I don't know who else would approve of the job your state legislature is doing. Well, you know what my real ballot title is? And we polled internally, and we found it made a huge difference. Assemblyman/military reservist. You see, when people find out that you're a military reservist, they're willing to potentially forgive you for being a scum-sucking politician. And when we did our internal polling, we found that that title doubled my support. Doubled my support. So you take 8-9%, you double it, take a little bit off the front runners, and what you find is there's a three-way race, all within the margin of error, which is what my internal poll showed. So we'll see when Field and PPIC start using the real ballot title rather than the one that puts me in the hole right from the start, making people think I'm just another worthless politician. So that's the state of the race. We've now raised somewhere north of $1.6 million from over 23,000 contributions.